We've had a feel-good Formula One story emerge from the ultra-tight midfield battle, and that's McLaren, who appear to be taking control of this championship fight that we've detached really from the front three teams. In the last couple of weekends, it's been clear that the McLaren is the leading car in the chasing pack. And to talk about how that's happened, I've got Jake Boxall-Legge and Ed Straw with me. Now, Ed, it's been a while since we've talked about McLaren. We've kind of left them to it while they've been getting on with their job. When we last spoke, early in the season, we were saying there were signs that they'd finally fixed kind of the fundamental problems, be it structural or with the car itself, that had held it back in 2018. There's no question that they've kicked on since then. How have they done it?
Yeah, massively. The key has been the Spanish Grand Prix upgrade, which I think JBL will talk about in a bit more depth in a minute. I mean, early in the season, the car was decent. It still had that rear end instability that it had last year, not as bad, and that was a problem they just couldn't dial out of the car last year. But the Spanish upgrade, and then once they'd understood that through the next few weekends, they've really got a car that in the high speed and the medium speed is nice and stable now, which is really, really important. And I think that on top of the fact that the team, trackside, even last year, trackside, the team was strong. They get the best out of the car they've got. They're good strategically. They're very good on tyres this year as well. That's been a real strength. And now they've got the qualifying pace as well to go with it. So since they've got on top of that upgrade, they've been able to be consistently in that fight for best of the rest. They've been best of the rest 4 times in 9 races this year, and I think 3 of the last 4 races, which is hugely impressive. And I think that tells us that the sort of baked-in problems they created last year have gone, and they're now a kind of a handy midfield team, a strong midfield team. And in fact, you'd have to say hats off to them. It's gone as well realistically as it could have done, because getting to the front of the midfield pack would have been a big leap. Early in the season, when they were in that position, I'd have said maybe it's a little bit fortuitous because of the overall performance profile, but recently, really impressive. And I think that genuinely they've got a shot from here of staying as the 4th best team, which is a tremendous achievement considering where that team was last year.
Yeah, such a quick turnaround, and that's glowing praise really there, JBL. Ed mentioned the Spanish upgrade and the fact we're going to get you to talk about it. What exactly did they change? How many things did they change? And have they done much to the car since, or has it been a matter of understanding all the changes they introduced for Spain?
Yep, so in Spain they brought quite a lot of parts actually. It was like a new front wing, so as you can see it's a lot more similar to what Ferrari is running. New rear wing as well. They had quite a relatively low drag kind of rear wing layout in the first few races. Then they came to Spain with something a little bit more conventional. New engine cover as well, because they were running a little sort of shark fin, and they'd gone, actually no, we'll just go for an actual full fat one. And they've just been able to bring all of those parts together. But in Spain, it didn't immediately work from the off. And I remember speaking to Carlos Sainz after the race, and he was really surprised that he'd actually got into the points, because the car in the low speed section in the final sector wasn't particularly great. And they said, okay, well, this is something that we really need to understand. So luckily they had a test straight afterwards, and they were able to work out what the problem was. They went to Monaco, Sainz came 6th. And since then they've just been trying new bits and pieces, trying experimental setups in practice just to see what works and what doesn't. They've been really getting on top of that upgrade package, and it's had such a lot of potential to deliver a lot of performance that McLaren has just gone from strength to strength, and now we're looking at perhaps the 4th best team in Formula One. But there is that, and I also think it's a bit of a cultural shift within the team as well, now that Andreas Seidl is there, now that James Key is there leading the technical team, although he's not had much of an impact on how the car is because he only joined at the start of the season. He's got that technical impact as well, just to drive people towards a similar goal. It's that shift in culture. If you remember last season, Fredo-gate, where there was people not entirely happy that they were given a Fredo as a bonus. You kind of gather that people are a lot happier in the team now. It's working a lot more harmoniously, and it's really paying dividends for them at the moment.
The one thing that Carlos Sainz said after the Austrian Grand Prix is that low speed is the main area where they still need to improve, although he was more benchmarking against the big 3 than the midfield rivals. So that's really encouraging for them that they're actually at least looking forward. They're not going to catch them, obviously, this year, but it shows that that's a team that's actually looking back in the right direction rather than going round and round in circles.
Well, that's a really good point. McLaren, it's only been a couple of races, but the performance, as you've both mentioned, has been so consistent and looks so legitimate that I think everybody has their eyes now on can they make inroads onto the big three teams. You mentioned there, Ed, it's not going to happen this year. The gap is just too big. But McLaren finally in a kind of reset position where longer term they can look at closing that gap?
It's at least not a completely ridiculous suggestion as it would have looked 12 months ago, because the first thing is become a good midfielder. They had to at least become a decent midfielder this year. They've arguably done better than that by becoming potentially the leading midfielder. If they can stay fourth by the end of the season, that's really impressive. Beating the Renault Works team, lots of investment there. That's fantastic.
Nobody was predicting McLaren as being one of the teams in the mix for fourth, I think, this year. You know, we would have maybe expected Renault versus Haas or something like that. So McLaren really have kind of put everyone else in the shade, haven't they?
No, exactly. They didn't, in testing form, they didn't look like they quite had the car to do it, and they have solved some of the problems that were limiting them. So realistically, it's such a different game, the big three, breaking into that. So all McLaren now can do is, now they've got this kind of sensible platform, and they've got to kind of the top end of where their potential is. They've now just got this slow process of rebuilding. Look how hard it's been for Renault. Great investment, but they're still not really going anywhere. It's like you're paddling harder, but you're not going anywhere any quicker. And that just reflects how well established and massive and just proven those big teams are. So, yeah, for McLaren, they'll be looking at 2021 and the new rules. That's the key for them. They've solved the worst problems of their technical department. They seem to be going in the right direction. They've got, as JBL mentioned, the right technical leadership and team leadership. So they've got as good a chance as any, but they're still not. They're not a massive Formula One team anymore. There's a long way to go. Remember, they've got they're going to do a new wind tunnel, for example, because they've been using the Toyota Motorsport facility in Germany and in Cologne for a long time. So all these things they need to do to make themselves a powerhouse team again are on the agenda. But it's going to take a long time, realistically. But that's not McLaren's fault. That's the fault of the game. It does take a long time to work your way up. But it's all about an upward trajectory. If you can be a little bit better next month than you are this month, and you keep putting those monthly improvements together, you'll eventually get to the front. And that's what they're doing, step by step. And that's good for Formula One, because we need teams like McLaren up there fighting and able to hopefully get podiums and maybe even race wins again down the line.
JBL, you almost have to assess the top three teams from a technical standpoint separately to the midfield when you're writing and assessing the technical areas of the F1 grid. Can you foresee McLaren being able to bridge that gap and get to the point where they can compete in terms of the development race itself and just where they can get to with, say, even launching next year's car as well? Do you think technically anyone can catch up under the current rules that we're in?
It all depends on the resource, and that's something that McLaren should have. Obviously, historically they have, but it's about keeping that steady gain throughout the season. And even when you're getting to a point in the season where you go, okay, we need to stop development of this car full time and put our eggs into developing next year's, you still, when you've got a lot of resources like Mercedes does, like Ferrari does, you can take some of your engineers and go, okay, you're still going to continue doing parts for 2019 while the rest do 2020. It's just whether McLaren have the personnel and the resources to do that. I appreciate it's a bit of a sit on the fence answer and say, oh, I don't really know. But it does depend on whether they can make that split now. I think for the time being, fourth is the best they're realistically going to achieve. But there's so many teams close behind them. There's obviously, if Renault make a step, they'll be up there. If Alpha can make a step, they'll be up there as well. So they can't really stop until they've stopped, which might create a bit of a disadvantage for them. But if McLaren has got the resources, as I say, then they can, split the development and then go from there, really.
But they will see 2021 probably as the big opportunity. The rules revolution for that season may not be as dramatic, perhaps, as was once hoped or expected, but that's still an opportunity for the reset and to maybe make a bigger gain than you otherwise would. And as JBL described, that's going to create that struggle where they want to do as well as they can this year and next year, but they'll need to divert some resource into 2021. And it's not a massive Formula One team now. Hopefully, improved performance means they can get more backers in, and it could persuade the investors to put in more money. Obviously, Bahrain has got a big involvement in the McLaren team, so there is potential further investment there. So success breeds success, doesn't it? And it's this modest success will at least mean that they can expand in a way they'd want to, although it's going to take a long time before they're up to the standard of a team like Mercedes with its vast resources and personnel.